Hey, Captain Mike from Forbes Fishing, and today's episode we'll be rebuilding the power trim rams on my 300 horsepower 4.2 liter V6 Yamaha engines. Stay tuned. Okay, here are the materials we're going to need for this job, and I'm going to start with the seals and O-rings. Part number 69J43822, and that is the seal on the top of the cap. And for each engine, you're going to need 2 of those. Working our way down, still on the cap though, we need a 6H1 43861-10, and that's a big O-ring. And for each engine, you'll need 2 of those. Down on the bottom of the shaft is another O-ring, 61A 43864-00, and again, you'll need 2 of those. The reservoir plug also has an O-ring on it. The manual doesn't say replace it, but this is the first time I'm opening up that reservoir in 5.5 years. Why wouldn't I replace this little O-ring? 93210-09350, and you'll need 1 of these per engine. You'll need a little marine grease, both for installing the seal as well as on the tips of the shafts. And the fluid that you use is Dextron 2 ATF. I'm kind of surprised Yamaha doesn't have a special formulation. Then I started thinking about it. If every outboard guy, gal, changes this every 5-6 years, or maybe not even that often, maybe there's no economies of scale for them to brand transmission fluid in order to make enough profit. So it's ATF Dextron 2, that's what the manual says. What I do recommend, I had this left over from doing a flush on one of my cars. The gallon size is a pain in the ass. You actually don't want to use this because then you need to adapt some kind of funnel mechanism to get into the reservoir fill, and it's just kind of a hack. Get the quart size, or at least get 1 quart that has a pointy tip on it that you could shoot it right in that reservoir hole. This was kind of a fail, although I didn't spend any money because I had it in stock. Okay, the tools that you're going to need to do this job, I'll start over here. You need an oil extractor of some kind to take out the old transmission fluid out of the cylinders. This is an electric one that I made myself, but you could use a manual one. You'll need some kind of tub to catch all the ATF that's spilling out over the cylinders. And here we have, this is a 17mm socket for your ratchet to open the reservoir plug. You'll want a thin piece of wood. I'm using a paint stirrer here in conjunction with some flathead screwdrivers to pry out the dust seals on the top of the caps. And that's what I had these 2 screwdrivers for. This one's a little thinner of a blade. This one's a little wider. We'll need a 1/2 inch wide flathead to open the manual release valve for the system. I like using a dental pick for taking off old O-rings and the retaining clips that are on top of the cap. You may want some Scotch-Brite to clean off any residue that's left behind underneath the seal. The most important tool you need is a cap removal tool. This one is from Marine Tech Tools, and I highly recommend it. It will absolutely show up as a link in the video description. It's engine specific, and this model is an AMT004. It works for the 4.2 liter V6s as well as a number of other Yamaha engines, but you'll have to go onto their website to see for your particular model. It comes with 6 of the pins, and they're replaceable, and I'm sure you could order more if you were to mess them up. Great tool. In conjunction with that tool, I found that a 5/8 inch piece of reinforced hose works really good to hold this tool in place on the shaft. I may even patent this part. I'm going to call it Yamaha part number J52 Peroni, because it kind of has a little bit of Peyronie's disease. You're going to need a 1/2-inch breaker bar. Along with that breaker bar, you're going to need some kind of piece of tubing, a pipe or whatever that fits over your breaker bar to give you some additional leverage. I'm using a piece of 1x square stock just because it's what I had laying around. You're going to need a torque wrench. You are going to need your shop manual. You are going to need a shit ton of paper towels. This probably was close to a full roll before I started the job, and it's almost empty. This is an 18mm socket, but depending on your brand of socket, you're going to need to figure out what size you need. I'm really just using this as a press to push the seals into place on the caps. And it's really this outside diameter that you're worried about. This is an impact socket, so it's a little fatter, and it's an 18mm, but again, your socket is likely going to have a different outside diameter. And then I have a little rubber mallet, and I basically was just using that to tap that in. Okay, before we loosen the caps, we're going to put our kickstand down here, and we're going to release the manual control valve. And I'm doing that with a 1/2-inch screwdriver, flathead, and you'll see the engine get rest, will come to rest on the kickstand once we get the valve open enough. And there you go. I'm going to open it all the way. What that's going to allow to happen is it's going to open all the it's going to open the reservoir into this piston, into this piston, into this piston, instead of it being sealed up so that the engine, so the electric motor can pressurize the system. It's just going to open it so everything flows freely. Make sure you have a catch can under the tubes, because the next step is going to get messy. I have here the tool from Marine Tech Tools to remove these caps, and you can see the 3 pins on the back side. And this tool needs to remain in perfect plane with that piston. If you have it cockeyed, you're going to pull one of these pins out, screw up the hole, and then you're going to have an even harder time getting this thing off. So one thing I figured out was it's kind of difficult by yourself to hold this tool in and keep it flat. If you had a helper, I guess they could put their hand over it. I have here a piece of 5/8-inch reinforced hose with a little bit of a bend in it. Also have a slit down the center of the hose because it doesn't really fit perfectly. And when I slide that on, there's enough pressure from the bend of the hose, I think, and the just friction from the hose being too small to fit over that it holds it in place. Okay, I've slid a piece of 1x square stock over my breaker bar just to give me some additional leverage. I'm going to keep my hand on the shaft here and start applying pressure. And look at that, it broke. So easy. Get rid of this bar, don't need that anymore. Get rid of this tube. Look at that. Perfect. Maybe I should sell these online. We'll call it Yamaha Tool J-47-Peroni. Shaft's probably going to be slippery, so just grab a paper towel and you're going to wiggle it while pulling up. Remember, there's an O-ring in there that's pretty tight to the cylinder by design. It is coming. All right. So I'm just going to cover up this cylinder with a plastic bag for now. It's raining here. I'm under a tent, but I'm outside in the elements. And while I go work on that piston, I just want to make sure that we don't get any garbage in there. Going to start here with the cap, and we're going to remove this split ring. And it's not a split ring with the holes in it, it's just one with two barbs. And I've heard people say that these fly all about the place, but it's not my experience. Put your thumb over the opposite side of the clips and use either a very small screwdriver, or I'm using a dental tool to just pry up one of the tabs and work it around the groove, and it ends up coming off on your thumb. Not so hard. All right, this seal is a press fit, and you could see a little groove. You could see where it meets the housing right here. We're basically going to put a screwdriver in there and separate it some. Resist the urge to twist your screwdriver like this and gall this aluminum edge, because then it impacts its ability to seal, and you don't want anything getting through there. So we're just going to take care. I'm going to use a small screwdriver at first to push in there a little bit, and I could feel that it's going in nicely. I'm going to switch to a larger screwdriver to pry it. Just gives you more surface area. Get that in. And I'm going to use a paint stick here to protect the top of my cap. As I pry, and then I'm going to work my way around the seal. The crunching is my paint stick, don't worry. That was it. She's out. Ooh. So you can see the paint stick kept me from marring the top of that. What you do see is some water got in there and mixed with the transmission fluid. So it's a good thing I'm doing this now. I have no gouging on that surface because of the care we took with the screwdriver. Don't twist it. It's just a pry. Use my dental tool to remove that O-ring. It's garbage. And stick your finger through that hole, make sure there's no burrs, make sure it feels smooth. If you had any crust on here, on this edge, which one of mine did, you could use a little Scotch-Brite. Hey, there's one for the blooper reel. If you had any crud in here, you could use your Scotch-Brite on that inside edge as well. Okay, I'm just going to set this cap aside while I work on this guy. And we're going to use our dental tool to take the old O-ring off. Before I take it off, you'll see the white plastic keeper ring, which Yamaha says you don't have to replace, is at the top of the shaft. And the O-ring's at the bottom. So we're going to wipe this guy down real good. Make sure there's no crud in that groove. Gonna dip you in some fresh ATF here. Nothing special there. So we got our retainer ring towards the top of the shaft, O-ring at the bottom. Okay, now for the cap. I'm going to put a little marine grease. Oh, this stuff is thick. Not a ton, I'm just trying to lube up that center hole a little bit so that the seal goes in a little easier for me. So here's a close-up of the seal, and you can see it has kind of a cup side. Cup side faces down. And you'll see the top side has a protrusion on the center rim there that points up. Now I'm going to end up using an 18mm socket to help press this in. And normally you like this big flat space to press in a seal. But if you look at that, if I use the flat portion of the socket, I'm going to press on that top ring and possibly deform it. So I don't want to do that. I'm going to use the socket end, not the ratchet end, and you'll see that it's a much tighter fit. So this is an impact socket, 18mm. Now the walls are a little thicker on this, which is probably why it fits perfectly in this hole. So you're just going to have to figure out based on your set of sockets what size socket fits in the hole best, and basically just set it in there. And you want the biggest one that'll basically fit in there, and that's it. And put a little grease on the outside of that seal. I'm going to start this by hand, just keeping it even. All right. Now as I'm tapping this, listen to the sound, and you'll hear almost a more hollow sound until it seats all the way down, and then you'll hear a more solid sound. So hopefully it'll come through on the video. All right, start listening now. Kind of hollow, kind of hollow, kind of solid, right? So that's when you know you're down all the way. And another hint, since we put a little grease on there, you could see that the grease squished out in a couple spots. And because we used the socket end, we didn't mess up that top ring at all. So I got enough grease on there. If I didn't have that much grease on it, I would probably go put a little bit more on. Now let's put that ring back on. Again, these should be drama-free. Put your thumb over the one side, over the kind of the middle of the C. Insert one end into the notch and just work the rest of it around. I mean, it didn't fly across the room, no drama. And just make sure that it's pressed in all the way around the outside. You may have to help it. Last O-ring here, part 861. Get some ATF on there. Slide it over. Reinstall it on the shaft. It should be nice and smooth. Shouldn't feel any catching. And that's perfect. Okay, I have my DIY oil extractor here, And if you don't have something like this, I highly recommend buying or making one. I have a video on how I made this one. I'll put a link in the upper right hand portion of the screen here. You can use one of those manual pump out ones. It's just a pain in the ass. Just do yourself a favor, buy one or make one. You'll use it for a lot of things. Work great for jet skis. It works great for changing the oil on these outboards. Has a lot of uses. Using an extractor is so much easier than a power extractor. Here I could just hold the suction tube right at the bottom corner, and I'm not sitting here trying to pump something with my other hand. You're going to fill each cylinder right to the bottom of the threads. Anything more than that's going to kind of be a mess for you. I'm going to lube those O-rings up one last time before threading the caps in by hand. Once that's too difficult, use the cap removal tool to get them snug down the rest of the way. Okay, I'm going to use the Peroni hose again. And we're torquing these to 118 foot-pounds. Let's top off this reservoir. This is where having a smaller quart container with a pointy nose would be easier. Or even the those pumps that we use for the lower ends. I just didn't want to fill one up full of transmission fluid because I don't do a lot of these. All right, here comes the mess. Okay, I've already put a new O-ring onto the plug. This plug is feels like it's aluminum. It doesn't feel very heavy, or it's a very light steel. But it doesn't require a lot of torquing, and this housing isn't all that thick, so the threads, and they are aluminum. So you're just snugging this up. You're not over tightening it. Good. Now let's begin the bleeding process. Open the valve so that the engine comes down under its own weight, but do it slowly. You don't want to damage the tilt pins at the bottom. Close the valve once the engine gets to the bottom, and then under power, send the engine back up in the air. Once it's up in the air, open the valve again and do one more full cycle. Then we're going to close the valve, send the engine up one last time, and we're going to open the reservoir and top it off. Close the reservoir, open the release valve, let the motor come down, and close the manual release valve, and you should be good to go. Test it one last time, and you should have all of the air out. You're almost done. Now just apply some marine grease to the tips of the tilt rams and the sockets on the engine bracket. Now you're done. Hey, if you enjoyed this content, please hit the like button. Consider subscribing to my channel. Thank you, and tight lines.